Ladies and gentlemen, let's rate gaming.com video. Let us discuss sales figures for games and the cost of game production, shall we? I think this is a really good topic because of recent news that's popped up coming from Reuters. It would appear that Activision Blizzard, the CEO, was speaking in a conference at Milken in LA and revealed that if you're making a $500 million bet, you can take the chance with someone else's IP. The stakes for us are getting bigger. A $500 million bet and you can't take the chance with someone else's IP. Oh boy. This basically sent a series of shocked and confused messages across the internet, because that means that effectively they are spending considerably more than what most Hollywood films cost. Indeed, they're going to be breaking some serious records here for how much this title is going to be costing to produce. And here's where it gets a bit interesting. This would mean they would need to sell between 15 to 16 million units, particularly when you start to factor in shipping, distribution, licensing fees to either Microsoft or Sony, the cost to actually sell it at the shop, all of this different bits and pieces is going to cost them between 15 to 16 million units, assuming it's the standard typical game price of $60 per game. Now, there are already analysts who have looked at this and have said, you know what, this is a brand new IP. It's not been released, it doesn't have a history, it's not Call of Duty, and so we reckon it's going to do well, but it's not going to be shifting 15 million. We think it's going to be shifting about 8. So there's a serious disconnect here. Hopefully the analysts are wrong, particularly if you were to be from Activision or Activision Blizzard, because my goodness, that's a huge deficit. If not, it means basically the game is going to be costing them around 200 million. And if you look at titles like games from Capcom, say Resident Evil 6, or I believe even Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom, or say titles like Hitman, Absolution, and Tomb Raider, the latest Tomb Raider, and there are other games as well, of course, if we started to look through them, Dead Space 3, for example, that's another classic example where EA just said, hey, we don't actually know if we want to continue this because we didn't really make that much money on it. Just think about that. It's like they hoped for a sale amount. In other words, they budgeted it like this. We assume it's going to sell this amount, and there you go. That's the budget for the game, and pretty much there we have it. When you consider the various Hollywood titles like X-Men, the new X-Men movies, like 225 million, same with Desolation of Smog, you've got Avatar, which was like 240 million, and so on and so forth. You can start seeing the ridiculous amount of money. Now, I'm not saying this ridiculous in terms of like, oh my god, how dare they spend their money, their investment money on a title. It's their product, and I wish them all the best luck in the world. But ultimately, I have a few concerns with this. The first concern I have is that they're going for everyone's favourite thing in the world, mass appeal, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it also means that titles which generally aim for the widest appeal sometimes have the less life in them. They have less soul because they're aimed at a smaller, at the widest possible audience. They don't want to offend anyone. They don't want to appear too difficult or too challenging or whatever. They just want to draw in as many people as possible. It also encourages developers to monetize the game in other ways. For example, DLC and microtransactions. I'm not saying these are going to be in this title. I'm just saying that they're going to have to get the cash somehow or another. The other problem I've got, to be honest, with all of this, is it seems to foster yet even more unrealistic expectations. Yes, if we were to look at something like Grand Theft Auto 5, the developers, Rockstar, put in a ridiculous amount of work into the game. They kept putting it off, they waited as long as absolutely bloody possible to release the game so that it was as good as they could possibly make it. They had a huge budget, and they ended up making something like, I don't remember the exact amount, like $2 billion or something like that in all the time that the game's been released, which is obviously, 4 times what these guys' budget is for the game. But you've also got to remember, it's Grand Theft Auto 5. Think of how long people waited for that game. Think of how many people, the audience, the mass appeal the GTA had. Think of it as well, the Vice City, GTA 5, San Andreas, GTA 4. All of these games all did really well. They all had a history of being fun, entertaining. They had memes made after them, and so on and so forth. And because of that, you knew the game was going to do incredibly well. I'm just, from the perspective of the game industry, as both gamers and games developers, I wonder how healthy it is to be using these type of sums of money to develop a game, because you get a couple of those that flop, you're making a huge gamble, even if you've got $1 billion company. It's like you start having 2 or 3 of those games that just don't sell well, like half the numbers, and it's just not good for the gaming industry, in my personal opinion. That's how companies start to really go to the wall. And to reiterate, I'm not saying that I wish, Activision harm. I wish them, honestly, the best luck in the world. I do for any games developers, unless they're really trying to screw over the customers, unless they're putting in shitty practices like really horrible microtransactions and stuff like that, and trying to screw the customer over. I wish all the best in the world, best luck in the world, but I just wonder how sustainable those type of sums of money are. And admittedly, Capcom are not Activision, Square are not Activision, but even so, as I've said before, that a couple of those series were in danger of just basically being shelved because they just weren't selling as well as what the developers had hoped, and they're not putting in anywhere near that amount of money. And indeed, some of those series actually made the money, the development costs, back as well. Anyway, guys, I'm just curious what you think about this one. I mean, it's obvious the games are going to become more expensive now to develop and produce and to market and so on, because it's great having these ridiculously powerful systems. Unfortunately, it also means that we have to develop for them. We have to get the most out of the graphics technology. We have to make sure that the game is bigger and better and has awesome audio. And we have to make sure that the voice acting and the storyline and the everything about the game has to be of really high production quality to make players want it. That's the problem. And similarly, there's so much marketing competition right now. I mean, for example, in magazines, on websites, on TV, on billboards, and everything else, it costs a hell of a lot of money to advertise these titles. And while you may say to yourself, I'm sorry if I could suddenly, speak English, that would be amazing. While you may say to yourself, well, I guess that's just the direction AAA gaming's going to have to go then. I mean, then you look at indie titles that are just these made by very small studios in comparison. I mean, Minecraft automatically springs to mind, but then you've got other games like Terraria and, let's say, Don't Starve, and so on and so forth. And these are Outlast, of course, and these are made by very small and comparative teams, but they're making a hell of a lot of money. And sure, they're never going to bring in the 2 billion of GTA 5, but they're certainly bringing in a decent amount. Anyway, guys, I'm kind of going in a bit of circles here, and I'm just really curious to know what your opinions are on this. I genuinely am curious to hear what your thoughts are regarding games becoming so expensive to produce and market. Do you think it's sustainable? Do you think it's just a future that's just obvious that we can't get away from it? Do you think it's dangerous, or do you think it's just going to be, well, it's just going to be okay because one game is going to offset another game that's a bit of a flop? Anyway, I'm going to let you guys go. I'll see you soon. Take care, and bye for now.